So this is going to be a complete analysis of every manipulation technique Candace Owens applied to her retarded audience in the premiere of Bride of Charlie, an investigation, if we can call it that way, into Erika Kirk. And by the way, you heard that right. If by this point you still take Candace seriously, you are retarded. So if that's your case, better just click away because you're so dumb, you're not going to understand the concepts I'm going to explain, so just unsubscribe. So she announced this as a self-contained series, but immediately inflated, and now I'm thinking about a season 2 and a season 3. That is important. She's telling you the length of this series is driven by content strategy, not by evidence. She has not presented a single finding yet, and she's already planning multiple seasons. That's not how investigations work. That's how content calendars work. Now, I went through this entire episode and did a full statement analysis, every claim, every rhetorical move, every contradiction. And what I found is a masterclass in manipulation disguised as journalism. The techniques she uses are the exact same ones I teach you to spot in toxic personalities, and once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. Welcome back, my body language buddies. My name is Jesus Enrique Rosas. I'm the body language guy, and I'm about to break down the rhetorical architecture of this episode piece by piece so you can learn to spot these manipulation techniques. Let's get down to it. Part 1 is the victim self-framing. The first 4 minutes of the episode contain zero evidence. Zero. Instead, Candace spends 4 full minutes positioning herself as a victim. She says her opponents posted photos of her manager's infant daughter and that her producer received threatening voicemails. And look, if that happened, that's terrible. Nobody should target a baby. But notice the function this serves. By opening with that, she builds a psychological shield around the entire series. If you criticize the investigation, you are aligned with the people who targeted an infant. If you question the evidence, you're part of the harassment campaign. In logical fallacies, this is called Mott and Bailey. The defensible position, targeting families is wrong, protects the indefensible position. Therefore, my unverified claims must be valid. That is, I'm not gonna lie, elegant, but deliberate. And then she compares the phrase, "she's a grieving widow," to "trust the science" from the pandemic. So let's think about that for a second. Being a grieving widow is a verifiable biographical fact. Her husband was assassinated. Trust the science, on the other hand, became a controversial argument about how we decide what is true. Those two things are not in the same category, but by linking them, she activates her audience's pre-existing distrust of institutional narratives and transfers it onto Erika. That's not analysis, that is emotional anchoring. That is a manipulation technique. She also justifies the investigation by comparing Erika to Hillary Clinton, or Michelle Obama, and even Meghan Markle, arguing that Erika should receive the same scrutiny. But that comparison collapses instantly. Hillary was Secretary of State and a presidential candidate. Michelle was First Lady for 8 years. Meghan has worked for decades to earn her worldwide infamy. Erika Kirk became CEO of Turning Point USA because her husband was murdered weeks earlier. These were not comparable public profiles. Erika's public exposure was thrust upon her by tragedy. The comparison exists to make the investigation feel proportionate when it isn't. Which brings us to part 2, somebody else's opinion. The longest single segment of this episode, 11 minutes, is not Candace's own investigation. It's her reading someone else's post on X, an opinion by a woman named Elizabeth Lane, who Candace calls an investigative journalist. Lane's letter diagnoses Erika Kirk as a psychopath, not might show signs of, no, a psychopath, period. Now, what are Elizabeth Lane's credentials for making this clinical diagnosis? She comes from the world of acting and modeling. Not clinical psychology, not psychiatry, not any diagnostic discipline. She watched public video clips and decided that because Erika makes her feel uncomfortable, Erika must have shallow affect and rehearsed emotional display. There are a dozen reasons why someone might appear stiff on camera weeks after their husband's assassination. shock, medication, media coaching, dissociation as a grief response, being a private person in an extraordinary public moment. The leap from "she makes me uncomfortable" to "she's a clinical psychopath" is not an analysis. This is literally a character assassination dressed up in academic vocabulary to sound credible. Oh, and one thing about psychopaths is that part of them being so dangerous is that they are hard to spot, hard to tell from normal, non-psychopathic people. So the argument that many people feel something's off about Erika, so she must be a psychopath, yeah, it's a retarded argument. But this segment exists for a reason. Candace doesn't make these accusations herself. She reads Lane's words, then says, "I concur." If this ever becomes a legal problem, Candace can say, "Those were someone else's opinions. I just read them." She lent her platform to the most inflammatory claims in the entire episode while maintaining plausible deniability. That is textbook outsourcing of liability. And that tells you she knows exactly what she's doing. And right after the Lane letter, she pivots into a lengthy digression about MK Ultra, Sigmund Freud, Project Monarch, Operation Paperclip, the Epstein Files, and Emmanuel Macron. None of this has any evidentiary connection to Erika Kirk. None. Its function is purely atmospheric. It trains the audience to associate Erika's story with mind control, government conspiracy, and elite networks before a single factual claim has been examined. This is conspiratorial priming or framing, building a scaffold of suspicion that future claims can hang on even when they have nothing to do with the scaffold itself. So we arrive at part 3, and Candace seems finally ready to make a point. After the Lane letter, Candace finally presents her own findings, and this is where it falls apart. Finding number 1. Erika lied about being raised by a single mother because her father Kent was present. But Candace's own evidence undermines this. She plays a clip where Erika herself openly discusses her father being a stay-at-home dad. Erika is not hiding this. The People magazine quote says that Erika's mother divorced her father and raised her as a single mother. Erika was 10 when her parents divorced. If her mother was the primary custodial parent from age 10 on, raised by a single mother is a simplification, the kind virtually every child of divorce makes. Candace is treating a magazine profile like sworn testimony. Well, finding number 2, Erika's birth date appears as November 20th in a newspaper announcement and November 22nd in divorce papers. 2 days off. Well, we're talking about a pre-digital 1998 filing. Clerical errors in legal documents, especially from the 90s, is extraordinarily common. Candace even admits that it's entirely plausible that they went in and fixed these glaring errors. She concedes it might be nothing, then keeps presenting it as though it proves something, I guess. And that is the problem. It proves nothing. There's no point being made. Oh, there's something odd about her birth date. Okay, whatever, man. And then finding number 3. 4 different marriage dates in divorce documents. Candace speculates, and I repeat, speculates, that maybe someone had a friend down at the county clerk. But then she admits she couldn't find a marriage record in Marblehead, Massachusetts, and immediately adds, doesn't mean it doesn't exist. That is the rhetorical blueprint of this entire episode. Raise a question, fail to answer it, then imply that the absence of an answer is proof of a conspiracy? I don't know, but then we go to part 4, and we go full-time machine and the Tesseract. This is where the episode goes from weak and boring to absurd. Candace presents newspaper clippings about Erika's great-grandmother running illegal slot machines in the 1940s, and her great-grandfather being chased by police for lottery tickets in 1935. That is 80 to 90 years before Charlie Kirk's assassination. And Candace tells the audience to sear this into your mind because it's going to become increasingly relevant. Okay, I'm going to bet that gambling threat is either A, never connected to anything, or B, connected to a nothing burger. But this gets better. Candace discovers Erika attended a Tesseract charter school in Arizona. The school building was also used by a children's program called Looking Glass School. Candace treats the name Looking Glass as a significant connection to her earlier episodes about Project Looking Glass, a conspiracy theory about CIA time travel technology. The name is a reference to Lewis Carroll's Through the Looking Glass, one of the most famous children's books ever written. So, you discover that a school was named after an extremely popular children's book? You must be Sherlock Holmes or something. Treating it as a coded CIA reference is textbook apophenia, seeing meaningful patterns in random data. And she also introduces what she calls the more for far for scandal. Swedish viewers emailed her to point out that Erika used the Swedish word morfar, which means mother's father, when referring to her paternal grandfather. Candace treats this as evidence of a paternity conspiracy. The mundane explanation? Erika is a non-fluent Swedish heritage speaker who grew up in Arizona, not Sweden. Millions of second and third generation Americans misuse kinship terms in their heritage languages. This is not evidence of a conspiracy. This is evidence of growing up American. Which brings us to part 5, the impossible Erika paradox. The single most devastating problem with this episode is one that Candace cannot escape because it's internal. Within the same 64 minutes, she presents two Erikas that cannot coexist. Erika number 1, the mastermind, comes from Lane's letter. She's a calculating psychopath who recognized Charlie was her ticket to power, strategically reshaped her identity, and walks onto stages as if she was born there. Erika number 2, the puppet, comes from Candace's own commentary. Her lies are so stupid, she may not even be aware she's lying. Things are downloaded into her mind. You cannot be both a cunning psychopath who married into power and a confused person too stupid to keep her own story straight. The two portraits are mutually exclusive, and both are presented with equal confidence in the same episode. I'm gonna be honest. I thought that this was going to be at least remotely amusing, like her becoming Brigitte serious. The receipts were an opinion letter from a non-psychologist, a 2-day clerical error, a simplified childhood description, 90-year-old gambling charges, and a children's school named after Lewis Carroll. None of it, individually or collectively, none of it constitutes grounds for questioning anyone. And the most revealing moment might be Candace's own words at the end. I am not going to assign any maliciousness into her very many mistakes about her background. That comes after 55 minutes of doing exactly that. The disclaimer is not a genuine caveat. It's legal insulation. The audience has already absorbed the narrative. The damage is done. The caveat exists to prevent any lawsuit. And I must address her audience again. I don't want to drive the point home again. Yeah, you're a bunch of retards. But considering that there are so many of you, I decided to formulate a law that explains why so many of Candatards are going to watch this video and are not going to flinch in their beliefs. And I baptize it as Candace's law of irreversible retardation. If someone is dumb enough to believe a stupid enough theory, then eventually they will cross the retard event horizon, the point where they are so far gone that no amount of logic can ever unhoax them. But again, I would like to know what you think about this in the comments. My name is Jesus Enrique Rosas. I'm the Bottled Language Guy. Much love and bliss.